All right, U.S. history. I got to go backwards here a little bit. Sorry, got ahead of myself. Anyway, U.S. government, period 2, period 3, and we are starting the next unit on politics in America. We're going to start with political parties. So, and you can see here too, people think of political parties. They generally think of the two major political parties, but we have a lot of political parties in this country. So, if you're not thinking you like the major parties, I'm sure there's something, if you want to get politically involved, somewhere, some group matches kind of what you think. You may want to get involved. So, anyway, from your text, these are the things you might want to be aware of, just some of the outcomes from there in this slideshow. As with all of my slideshows, I'll get into detail on some things, more so than your text. But just from your reading, these are some of the things you're going to want to pay attention to. Okay. First of all, what is a political party? Again, from your text, a group of individuals who organize to win elections, operate the government, and set policy. Very nice, very concise. I prefer a group of voters. Okay, not just a group of individuals, but a group of voters organized to offer candidates, elect officials, okay, because there's going to be a platform. The party's policies are the platform. We'll discuss that later. Set out positions on issues that may range from war and taxes to how our children should be educated. And, of course, we've talked about those types of things in our federal system. Support certain public policies. Provide a way for voters to easily identify a candidate's positions. And this is one of the more obvious ways in what we see in a day-to-day, or at least in an election-to-election format. The parties put forth candidates, as we said before, and we use those parties, or what we know of the parties, to identify the candidates' positions. All right, what is a political party? Continuing, well, here are some ideas. Political parties may be large or small, the Democrats and the Republicans. Large parties, okay? National or local, they are both national and local. But you're going to have other parties, too, that have success more to local level. And they're broad-based or very, very specific. The Green Party started out very, very specific, but they're broadening, actually, their platform. The Constitution Party focuses on the Constitution. Libertarians are interesting. Someone once said that the Libertarian Party is an oxymoron. That libertarians are people that really don't want to be in a political party. But, again, very, very specific in what they think. And we'll have some links so you can look at what they think later. Okay. Now, moving on. George Washington famously warned us against, warned us against political parties. What he was talking about was factions. Okay. I don't know that he thought political parties themselves were necessarily evil, but he certainly did warn us against factions, against groups of people that tended to be very narrow-minded, narrow-focused, but would try to run the entire country or even geographic regions. Okay, but he's very famous for that. Now, let's get into political parties. This discussion is going to be mostly historical, just some brief overview of the history of political parties in this country. The first political parties, Federalists versus Anti-Federalists. Now, most people will say the Federalists were the first party. I don't know that you could say the Anti-Federalists were actually a party, or just more of a mindset as opposed to the group that was pushing the Constitution at the time. You can see the Federalist Party, too, even afterwards, restoring government integrity. We see these things today, but we don't imagine them always as going back, having these slogans even hundreds of years ago, but they did. What happened? Well, one of the things with the Federalists, we're going to talk about the Federalists, well, their leader. You can see Alexander Hamilton there. Unfortunately, their leader was killed in the duel by Aaron Burr. We even had a video, I don't know if you remember the video that talked about Hamilton and what would have happened had he lived, had he survived the duel. The person suggested he would become president, and our lives would be very, very different. We'll never know, though. Okay. Again, continuing with Anti-Federalists and the Federalists. And these formed, interestingly, obviously, they formed before ratification of the Constitution. And parties are not mentioned in the Constitution. And the Federalist Party started because these are the people that were pushing for ratification of the new Constitution, wanted a strong national government. Anti-Federalists, of course, argued against ratification. They thought the Constitution was going too far. Okay, and they were states' rights people, and they feared that powerful central government. We remember that discussion before. We were talking about this, just kind of a review of that information, but you all remember that. Now, Federalists encouraged the development of commerce and manufacturing. Northerners primarily believed the Republic, again a representative government, should be ruled by its wealthiest and best educated citizens, definitely a Hamiltonian view. Jeffersonian Republicans, or the Democratic Republicans, more agrarian, okay, Southern interests, and favored a limited central government. So they were states' rights people at that time. They didn't call themselves that, but if we're looking for something to relate them to in current, in the last few decades, we would look at them as states' rights people, okay? And they also believed Congress, not the president, should dominate national government. Why? They believed in representative government. They were afraid of a strong executive, as they had seen before the experiences prior to that, were that it could become more of despotism. And they wanted the Congress, the body that represented the people, to be the ones that had most of the power. Now, moving on, you get to Whigs versus Democrats. Okay, and absence of opposition, Jeffersonian Republicans actually split Democrats and the Whigs. Now, interestingly, just a quick note, Andrew Jackson's contribution, and I don't have it here, I forgot to put the little image in, but Andrew Jackson's contribution was the donkey. That came to represent the Democratic Party. Now, the Democrats have never actually officially accepted the donkey or recognized the donkey as the image for the party. It came up because Andrew Jackson's opponents called him Andrew Jackass, and that's where you get it. And so they never really adopted it. Jackson at the time embraced it, because that was just his demeanor. And kind of it became a non-issue because he didn't let it actually get to him, and he kind of embraced that and used it against them. Now, we see here at the Whigs now, okay, you've got the Whigs eventually would fade and join what would be the new Republican Party. We're going to get into the rise of the Republican Party, or the start of that, because at the time we were debating what to do with slavery, okay, especially in the new territories, not just in this country, but especially in the new territories. And so you're going to see that the Republicans are going to rise, but before we get to that, what happened to the Federalists? Well, after the War of 1812, which they opposed, okay, they're portrayed as traitors, okay, and so they faded away. People looked rather derogatorily at them and didn't think they were patriotic, and so they were painted as traitors, and they eventually faded as a party. Now, so we get to Democrats versus Republicans. Now we see this at this time, right before the Civil War. We see the Republican Party emerge, and from this point forward. There will be other parties, of course, but we're going to see it's the Democrats versus the Republicans kind of from this point on. The new Republican Party, the anti-slavery party, became known as the Party of Lincoln. Okay, and the reason for its existence, again, you might call it a single-issue party, at that time was opposing slavery, or at least the expansion of slavery in the territories. Okay, now, what happened then? Civil War to the Great Depression, obviously. The North won. The Republican Party, being the party opposed to slavery, is going to have a firm foothold. Okay, then from the Civil War to the Great Depression, Republicans are going to dominate national politics, okay, especially in presidential contests. Now, the Democrats, well, what happened to them? They were the party of the South, and they were kind of seen as the party of slavery, so they had to shift their focus. Obviously, they can't remain that. And eventually they will become, in the late 1800s, allied with the populist movement. Now, this image below, we have the Democratic Party kind of being absorbed. Most of the time you'd say that the Democrats absorbed the populists, that the populists ceased to exist because they just became part of the Democratic Party. This particular cartoonist, okay, is going to be very critical at the time. And hold on one second. In continuing, sorry for the quick break there. In this one, they're looking at William Jennings Bryan as the candidate. Now, the Democratic Party put forward Bryan as the candidate for president at the time, but he was seen as a populist. And so this cartoonist is saying that Bryan and the Populist Party is actually absorbing or swallowing the Democratic Party, not the other way around. Okay, and gotta get to, there we go. There we go. Moving forward. All right, now, Great Depression, World War II. New Deal programs helped the Democrats become the majority party. Now, I've got majority party in quotation marks, simply because majority party, we have to remember something too, moving forward. That majority party doesn't mean necessarily, and we're going to see some slides showing this, does not mean that they have the majority of the population or even a majority of registered voters. It generally means, what it means is that they are the majority party in Congress. So we have to remember that moving forward. Sometimes they'll give you the impression otherwise, but that's what it means. Anyway, so they become in Congress a majority party. National politics, they take the major stage because of the Great Depression. And of course, we've got Roosevelt here. FDR and his New Deal programs were primarily responsible for that, okay, helping out people because of the Great Depression, and open to people of all races, trying to help those who are poor, who are losing their jobs. So you can see the attraction there from the New Deal programs. Moving forward then, after that era, again, we're just kind of touching on some things. Got the Civil Rights era, which, and we'd mentioned this previously in civil rights in the last discussion, that the Civil Rights era actually didn't begin in the 60s. We tend to look at it as the 60s, and we showed that there was a lot of legislation, major legislation, started in the 50s, but the discussion goes well before that. We can see in 48, civil rights issues start to reveal real differences between, amongst the Democrats. The Democrats are going to go through an evolution during this time. They've got the Dixiecrats and the Democrats, as you can see up there, and if you wanted to read about that. Democrats considered civil rights as part of their platform, what they were moving forward with. Okay, most of the Democrats, that's what they saw. Okay, but there were a lot of Democrats, especially from the South, we mentioned that in the civil rights discussion, that they would be, the Southern Democrats, Deep South especially, not really that thrilled about the removing segregation and civil rights. So they're going to have to go through an evolution at this point, because even in the party itself, states' rights Democrats and Dixiecrats are going to be formed, and they are going to change their identity to what we currently, to what we recognize for the most part in this day and age. Now, civil rights, again, moving forward, we're running a little bit out of time. Democrats will win the 1964 presidential elections, and then they'll hold a majority in Congress, even though they're split. It's interesting at the time. I don't know if we'll have time to get into this at this time, but as to why, what happens even with the Republican Party at that time. But Northern Democrats and Republicans, actually, should be noted, were actually the ones forming, bonding together and getting civil rights legislation passed. The Dixiecrats at the time, not that in line with it, but they will eventually move out of the Democratic Party, and the Democrats will then start to portray themselves as the party of civil rights. Okay, and we'll get into the Southern strategy, hopefully a little bit. Rolling realignment, we're not going to have time, and I think we'll pick this up in our next section, in our next video. We'll finish up. We'll go back into the civil rights a little bit and then get to there. In the meantime, I will talk to you then.